Well, we've had three questions come in for tonight. There might be four, Marlene. It's my counting, my details. We'll see what happens. Doug, you might be right about Doug Legacy from British Columbia. You might be right about this being more a personal question. But anyway, let me take a look at what we're doing first and see what happens. You might get something out of the first three. This is a question from Valerie in England. And her question is, are the teachings of the mystery schools still relevant at this time, or are they outdated? It's a really interesting question. And the mystery schools are usually misunderstood by almost everybody. In the whole relationship that we have as a growing being, the mystery schools have always been an intermediary between the inability to perceive or engage with higher planes and the ability to engage with this plane. So they serve as a real helper to, in a kind of a way relevant to knowledge or information that has energy related to it, from one or two people or 5 or 6 people or whatever numbers of people who have been able to engage to some degree on a higher level and bring information through the language of the lower planes into the lower planes. The language of the lower planes is fairly dominant. Therefore, the perception of the lower planes have to be played to so that the lower planes can understand it in their own language. So the mystery schools in that case are schools through which a slow movement of language can occur. And then ultimately, and when I'm talking about language, I'm talking about energy language here, and more than English and versions of English and words to place on things and or not to place on things, because we are so critical at the lower planes about words and language that we use versus what other people use. And there is a tremendous diversion of value placed on the way a person says something. So this talk that I'm involved with right now may be scrutinized by those who say, well, he's not using the right words. Or they may say, well, oh, those are words I'm not used to. And it's a little bit more difficult for me to understand it because I'm used to this way of speaking versus that way of speaking. This is what we do, and it's a legitimate way to engage with helping ourselves to understand things. So in fact, we don't want to learn other languages. We just want to learn, we want to have other people to talk to us in the way we understand and think things should be spoken of. So you can see the mystery schools that might be really helpful in a kind of relative manner to help us to begin to shift frequencies to some degree so that our interest in having language that is used at this level to be more flexible so that we can understand things not only in the language of what we're used to, but have a kind of broader general idea about the relationship that we have while we're growing with other levels that we usually interpret from this level. So the mystery schools try to lift our emotional, mental aspects into a plane relative to the ability to perceive better without emotional reactive states occurring and dislodging the value that is placed on a statement. So in the long run, the relevance of mystery schools is so that energy at that frequency can be brought down into this frequency, and your receptivity as an individual at this frequency with your personalities can engage with that frequency and your mind, your emotion, and your physical personality, of course, and say, oh, I think I understand what they're saying. Oh, they must be saying this. If you're okay with that as a first understanding, then the mystery school is very valuable, because you'll have second understandings and third understandings and fourth understandings. Different because your mind is shifting somewhat to be receptive to the energy that's coming in through these mystery schools. That changes your mental perceptions and understandings. How can I give an example of this? Well, you might think that people who are very spiritual should act in a very specific manner. According to us, we have rules and regulations about the actions of others. Often, individuals who are engaged with another plane may be used to act in a certain way so that the person can actually see themselves, because the helper, that person who's involved with that mystery school, the helper, might be acting in a manner that is identical to what is happening inside you, not outside you, inside you. So in fact, something inside is disturbed because there's a validation of everything that happens to you on the unconscious level. There's a reflex to validate that. Otherwise, you wouldn't use it constantly. But that reflex must be subtly shifted so that there is an opening internally so that you can understand something that's more abstract than the very minute, linear way of engaging emotionally with something that doesn't agree with you. That implies a mental facility that is interested in hearing not only information that they agree with, but information they might not agree with, and then wonder where that the trail occurred that moved to what you don't really agree with. Recognizing that trail, you then begin to understand that's why that person came up with this thought. Then I can see the legitimacy of that thought. So that's more a mental way to look at something rather than an emotional tabulation of validity or invalidity. At the lower levels, we're more prone to do the validity or invalidity. That middle ground of mystery schools can cause some difficulties as well. Because with some mystery schools, and almost any way of looking at something from our perspective, For example, we look in mystery school and we say, well, this is not something that sits very well with me. Well, it may not sit very well with you, but the mystery school is trying to change that sitting, trying to be helpful to you. The dilemma with some of the interpretations of what the mystery school is trying to help with really is very cogent to the idea of the word spoken one at a time. Sometimes a person may say, well, you didn't say that word right, and they've lost what you're saying. Well, the importance of them saying that word was not spoken correctly is related to this plane. Yeah, legitimately, it may not be spoken well, but did you get the idea of that relationship with that phraseology? Did you get the purpose of that particular paragraph in the vocalization that the individual was involved with? You may have let that go into the background because it was bothering you unconsciously, because it wasn't quite exactly what you believe at this particular second. Mystery schools will send a vibration into that system to enable you to shift your attenuator, the way you allow yourself to hear. This is annoying, but ultimately, higher levels don't actually think exactly the way we do, necessarily. Could they? I suppose. If you are the one that's representing an idea of a mystery school, you may perceive how you believe they function and express that. It may be valid, it may not be, but you have forgotten the relationship with frequency. Frequency was the most important thing related to the mystery schools. Not frequency necessarily in terms of raise, a certain kind of frequency, although that happens, but the relationship with movement between one plane of understanding and another, and another. Preparation is tremendously valuable in the relationship that we have with spiritual development. Belief is not as valuable, but our tendency to validate our belief means we are slowly held in positions so that we can actually allow ourselves to go beyond them. It's kind of a very strange 2 steps forward and a good step and a half back, so that we're okay with making another 2 steps forward and another 1.5 step back. See, you gained a foot there. If you gain that foot, that's a frequency foot. It eventually broadens out your capacity to understand beyond your relationship with what you valued more appropriately, correctly, according to the right-wrong process of a particular way of thinking of those things that are at another level. These other level mystery schools are extremely valuable. Dare I say the next thing? Vision and beliefs about these mystery schools are not so valuable. You can hear the reasoning in that if you consider the possibility that the relationship that an individual has with a mystery school is to shift the frequency that is already within you at the conscious level and unconscious level, to move into a space, true space, where you can perceive slightly differently, legitimately, and be at least in a movement towards being more comfortable with being broader than you could be before. No negation of the individuals. None whatsoever. They are there because they need to be in that space so that they can survive relative to to how they believe they need to be to survive, relative to how they need to be to survive in a world that they perceive and live through relative to the images that they already know for sure are real. In other words, the images of the world that they live in. No negativity attests to this thing at all. Mystery schools, if really mystery schools, can be schools through which higher levels of consciousness can operate until the point, the reference point of a legitimate conscious form, like you and I, trying to figure out stuff, becomes so involved with what you've figured out that we cannot allow ourselves to realize that the mystery schools have already elevated again to a state, in other words, past what we considered real previously. Maybe a second level considering real. They've moved into a different state to prepare us to begin to move again into a different state. How can you possibly give an example of that? Well, I'll come back to the normal plane of engagement. You're reading a book you've never read before. You have no idea about any information that you're about to read. So you pick up the book, you open the first page, and you can't understand a single thing in the book. Well, it's not the book you can't understand. You can't understand the first page. Well, here you go. What do you do then? The first thing you do is close the book. Put it someplace else. Maybe not. Maybe you say, well, you know, I can't figure this out. It was a stupid idea to try and read this book. Well, it's possible that it might have been a stupid idea for you to try to read this book. But here's another avenue. You pick up the book again after about a half an hour, or a half a day, or a day, and you look at the first page again. Lo and behold, you kind of understand what the author or authors are trying to say. And you're shocked. How come I understand this? Well, first of all, you picked up the book. You opened your mind to another attempt. That's really helpful. Second thing is, you decided to read it from the beginning again. And this time, you notice that you didn't read all the words last time. You had little reactions after a number of phrases of a sentence that really closed you down. You couldn't really understand. Even though you read the words, you couldn't relate to it. Your emotion was so strong, you couldn't actually relate mentally to what was being spoken. Now, if you didn't see that second part, you would go on doing the same thing as you did before, and after the first page, you would say, this is a ridiculous thing. I don't want to read this book. This is stupid. I'm not going to read this book. Okay. All right. I'm presupposing that there is a definite possibility that most people are legitimately interested in learning something more than they already know today. Just not this book. So you say, no, this is the will, right? You know how to use the will to not read it. Can you use the will to continue to read it? Well, it's very difficult. So you pick up the book again, and here we go. So you engage, and suddenly you almost understand the first paragraph. And then you sit back and you say, look, I think what this means is something like that. Legitimately, you have used your mind, the brain, and its relevant connection to whatever levels of mind that you are able to connect to. It crosses your mind, your brain, that you've read other things at university or high school or wherever, postgraduate classes, whatever it happens to be, that you didn't know anything about before, and you had a heck of a time trying to figure them out, but you did. So you go over that first paragraph again, and you say, let me see if that's really right. And all of a sudden you say, yeah, I think I've got it. And then you start slowly to read the second paragraph. There might be another half a paragraph left on that page. And by the time you're there, you want to flip the page over, because if you read the next sentence, just read one page a day. This is too tough. Now, flip the page over and you finish the sentence. And then there's a slight little paragraph coming up. It sounds like I've done this before. So you finish that paragraph and you say, I think I've got it. I think this is what they're trying to do. What are you doing? You're opening yourself to another level of emotional mind, granted, logical mind. But because you understand the first page a little better, second page, even though it may be a little bit representative of the first page, you know, if you got through the first page in a bit, opening your mind a little bit more will be maybe helpful somewhere along the line. Most people quit before they start. In spiritual growth, most people quit before they start. They lean on memorization. They lean on first reflexes. This is not negative. This is exactly why mystery schools are there. People who have been involved with mystery schools for 25 years, 50 years, will reach stages where they won't go into any other level of belief because they don't want to. It makes them feel secure to remain there. That doesn't happen to be negative. But there's a slight memory loss. The loss is they have forgotten that this is an energetic, if it's a real mystery school, it is an energetic relationship that they're dealing with. Those who have been in the mystery school before, or those who have been able to engage with higher levels of mental or emotional or personality response. Personality is a form, energetic in nature. Those who have been there before, who may not be alive now, are still engaged in the astral plane with a form. They're not there, but their form is there. It still engages, even mentally. In the mental form, that form may be slightly functional and already resonating with the frequency of the mystery school at a different level, a movement, a level that is higher than what you already believe is there, because belief will hold you as well as help you. Of course, most of us don't want to think that what we believe could possibly be only a lead-in to something else that we might begin to understand. That's legitimate too. There is a legitimacy in the sense of engaging with what you believe to nurture a sense of understanding that needs to be there to go on to the next stage. Otherwise, you will not understand what the next stage is. But it's a lead-in to the next stage, not a termination point of right versus wrong. Mystery schools are filled with that particular way of engaging. It's vital in the sense that it's filled with vitality, different than vitality, or vital meaning right. This is the only way, or this is the wrong way. The reaching in from many angles in a mystery school is extremely important to the school and to the individuals who would like to go beyond their relationship with what they believe currently. You see, there isn't a mystery school that's a true mystery school that is separate from other mystery schools. There is a cohesive link at a higher level that honors the relationship that the individual has in terms of how they are able to function energetically or frequency through frequency orientation and the link up with higher planes. They honor the higher plane link up, not the information that you've gleaned from the mystery school's relationship with language so that we can understand or attempt to understand what's going on. You can be the most brilliant person in the world and still be part of this plane simply because you're so smart. You can't, if you move, you won't be able to handle not knowing too well. Same is true of an individual at a lower level of mental orientation who dares not move into something that they figure they're not going to be able to understand, because if they do, they'll be considered stupid. There's no stupid. You are what you are. You have to grow through you, in you, around you, and know that you are linking up universally with others as these bonds through these schools attempt to help us be a part of. There will be other mystery schools, but the link-ups will all be coordinated towards a bonding, a blending, so that the mind can become more than what it seems to be at an intellectual level, so that the emotion can be more than what it seems to be as a director, a traffic director of information being validated or not validated. And the physical personality will ultimately be so translucent, not annihilated, but translucent, so that there can be a functional being able to perceive that which is within them and without them, and helping at one level to coordinate a relationship between a higher plane. They within themselves are a mystery, part of a deep mystery school, a helper for the purpose of being helpful to others, not elevated by a position. That will be considered not interesting, not valuable. But if it happens, it will be considered just a phase of engagement that moves you past and through that phase with the knowledge that that is not the method of being helpful to others as much as we think of it. We need a lot of help in that department as human beings. I'm assuming I'm talking to human beings because most of the rest of us are plain old humanoid. I hope that helps a little bit. So as you can hear, I don't devalue mystery schools. I don't devalue any of those schools, whether they be philosophical or mathematical, scientific, or tremendous mystical relationships with schools that can be spoken about, like brotherhood, theosophy, Rosicrucianism. All these schools are a focal point for energy, and we misinterpret from time to time. Because we're people, and we're learning, and we're growing, and we're attempting to do the very best we can. And we find that out. Question is, have you ever thought you were exceptionally right and found out you just made a slight mistake. You don't even agree with what you thought was right 10 years ago. And here you are, 10 years older, or farther along in your development, and you don't necessarily agree with what you used to think. But if you're wise, you will not negate yourself for that. And you'll remember it. So that because there's another 10 years coming, and it may be helpful to remember that you are in a continually developing process, energetically oriented, trying to make sense of that. And we should all well with that one. Okay, I think I better put my glasses on there and we'll be able to see the next one. This is one from Sue Alcott in Columbus. Could you please discuss the energetic reasons for Kriyas? I know they are a part of the growing process. I'm not afraid of them and use the tools when they happen. They come and go over the years. Kriyas are really interesting. I hope I can say this out loud. I'm going to ask people to read a book that most of you have probably read. Some of us haven't. It's called and this is for the 5-day, it's called The Autobiography of the Yogi. I hope I have that right. It's a book on Paramahansa Yogananda's life, and a few others focused in there, some of the yogis from the past. When I first started this, whatever it is I do, energetic work, what happened to me was Kriyas. Now, what are Kriyas then? Well, you're sitting and you're meditating, and you're comfortable, you're meditating, and all of a sudden your hand takes a different position on its own. You don't move it. For me, I knew I didn't move it, and that was very annoying for me at first, because I thought there was something off about this guy, because I didn't know anything about this yoga orientation way back in the late 60s or so. But I remembered what used to happen when I was a lot younger, and they were what you would call voice kriyas, or and I'm talking about words that would come to mind that you would use, and in particular, they were jokes. In high school, we used to tell all kinds of jokes I never heard of before. People would just rip their sides and find it really funny, and I'd think, where did that come from? And even when I said, I don't know where that one came from, they would laugh at that. I mean, what kind of crazy people laugh at anything? Weird. But I realized that our personality is inclusive of the physical body, the emotional disposition, the mental construct. And the relationship that we have with these systems is linked up, as I said a few minutes ago, with higher levels. And we'd like to say that, especially when we believe something ourselves, we speak it out and we say, and I don't know where that came from. You know where it came from. It came from you. That's your belief system. That's how you are. Well, the different thing is that when you speak or when you move and you don't know where it comes from, at first it's an imposition. And especially with words, eventually you better keep your brain functioning and say things like, do I agree with this? Is this valid for me? Because this system is growing and creating a form that is kind of honest and legitimate, relatively speaking, inside to you at least. So a kriya is an actual interesting thing. The way it started with me was it would move my hands and turn them on, my hands would glow, literally glow, and send energy to a place over here where there was energy attached to here or to here or to wherever. And it would move energy to here to help me with the broadening out of an aspect of a chakra. Well, in those days, I didn't know what a chakra was, or a center, or whatever you want to call them. So I'm using me because it's the only way that that I can give you an example. So this method is ancient. I know that now, but I didn't know it then. At first I thought I was in a lot of trouble because when I went to meditate, my legs would do my personality kriyas unconsciously. What does that mean? I would kick out, do anything to stop meditating. And finally, somehow inside of me, I got the idea that I should say, stop that. I'm busy meditating. So I'm talking to the self that's here, unconscious and conscious, with attenuators in the everyday world, trying to function and survive the best I can for all my faults and foibles and good things as well. And there you go. I'm trying to figure this all out. So suddenly, if I'm saying these things, it would stop. Then the mental kriyas would start. In other words, in my mind's eye, things would flash through, pictures of all kinds of things to take my attention off of meditating. Emotional kriyas would go. Responses from the unconscious, in the personality setting of many lifetimes, including this one, where you respond so that you don't go out of the realm of the conscious control of the personality that thinks it's in charge of everything. That was the old ancient scribes, the old ancient teachers meant when they said, you will become as if you are not there. You will be empty. Personality will be empty. They didn't mean kill the personality. They meant it will grow into a state where the relationship that is there will have to go through a series of profound stages where you know for sure that that flow can be there, is there, and it will help you to heal or have a higher level. Some people don't like the word soul or higher self or whatever, but another aspect of the personal, not personalized, but in relationship to you, come in and operate through you, and you must see the difference, and then eventually you become engaging with the first level of engagement as if the first level is translucent. Then that second level can help engage and help this form and others. And that's only 2 levels. Another level, of course, another level, never mind that. For us to handle 2 levels means that we may believe something, have insights or intuition, maybe using words normal people use, and those things we think are nonsense because it can't be that, because we have learned this and that's the way it has to be. In fact, your old beliefs come in and try to be the boss again. It's how it works. It works that way all the time for everybody. It's not just you, it's not just me, it happens to everybody. That's a part of the process of the translucency that we're in a process of movement towards. None of what has gone before is bad. Awkward sometimes, annoying sometimes, frustrating sometimes, not bad. So, because it's energy, constructed in a manner relating to survival. So, The energy from this other level, soul level, or whatever you want to call it, other level, comes through these centers, transmissional centers, chakras people call them, valves, whatever you want to call them, and move in a direction through the system and into the outward form that we have. We have a skeletal system. We call that the inner form. Well, it's inside the body. We have an external system. It's the thing you stand in front of the mirror and you check before you go downstairs or upstairs or wherever. And there is an inner form, deeper, that has nothing to do with the body, but has everything to do with the body, emotion, and mind. You express a relationship with that formula called the personality. It's only a formula. And that adjusts. And also, some of the old stuff can pop in because it's a reflex, and you've been trained to engage, negate, judge, assess, validates the formula. Yeah, sure, it does. But that's all part of a phase of growth. Another aspect within you, within the mind, even within the emotion, even within the physical form, engages and perceives that which is not perceivable currently. So within the personality, you begin to notice those things that we have within us that you would sometimes like not to have. And energy can be of service to that, helpful. Or you can, because you're engaging with everything at the same time. But energy is everywhere. Everything is energy. So the Kriyas are a link up with another level as long as they're honest Kriyas. In other words, Kriyas that move you and you didn't do it yourself with your personality. This is difficult for us because when you do Kriyas, when other people are around, it's impressive to other people. Here's the solution. When you're meditating, meditate alone. It'll take half the Kriyas away. But the ones that remain, at least you'll know they're real because you're not trying to do anything. I'm sincere in that. If you notice that you've had 3 or 4 or 5 Kriyas during your meditation, or 10 or 50, I don't care, but you'd only had 20, don't negate yourself. Say, oh my gosh, is it possible that my unconscious is trying to put forward my personality's importance by doing that? It's possible. It's a part of all of us that is in a process of growth. This must not be negated. Just note it. And that honest place within yourself saying, okay, no. If it's not real, don't want it. If it is real, don't let me stop it because I'm nervous. You want to allow that flow to come through to be helpful to you. Now, hands are just tools. You'll notice your head, if your brow comes on, will also be a tool. Your neck will be a tool. Your heart will be a tool. The root, gonad, and solar plexus will be a tool. The crown center is a tool. Do your best not to draw attention to those things. If no one knows, maybe it can be helpful. So be nonchalant. If your hands happen to move, let them move, but mask it so that people don't realize how that's working. If you're meditating like Sue is talking about, and those Kriyas are really strong because they can be sometimes very strong, you see, setting boundaries is an important thing in a relationship. What you don't understand is the boundaries that you set are self-interested. The boundaries I'm talking about is not about self-interest. It's about, you say, look, I don't have to have harsh kriyas. Easy does it. Talk to the energy as if it's something or somebody you can talk to. When you talk to it, you'll be shocked to find out it slows down, softens down, not slows down. Pardon me, my mistake. As it softens down, you'll notice it's not happening as much. Give it time. It wants to see, because this is continual growth, energetic growth. It wants to see whether you'll manifest it yourself in the unconscious. Talk to yourself. Be kind. Say, easy does it now. I want this to be all real so that I can really, truly be helped. Off the body, the exoskeleton, and in the body, the internal meat and potatoes of existence for you, at least at this particular stage in time. How are we doing? Well, I hope I covered that one well enough. Let me just see if I left something out. One thing I did leave out. It's easy for me to say that that higher level doesn't want to exclude us as a being of consciousness, as a personality. It wants to inform us of how we are. We are something other than what we see, what we believe, what we understand, even what we think. This is very difficult to understand. It's very metaphysical in a kind of a way. And very difficult, if you read philosophy, very difficult to come to grips with. Because philosophically, logic is an important part of the engagement with understanding something. And in this particular case, experience is an important part of engaging with something so you can understand something that might be more real than just a theory. This kind of a movement that we were talking about previously, mystery schools, all of that, and a relationship with growth, which Kriyas are a part of, because an ultimate Kriya eventually is energy transmitting through a brow or a heart center or a throat center, ground center, any center, to be helpful to another so that they can have more energy operate through them and be linked up with the higher level as well. Because that's the key part of a relationship with those exoskeleton, higher spiritual planes, what you might call, or let's say just higher planes than what we're really aware of most of the time. So in a kind of a way, when you're looking at this, there's a need for us to be real and honest with ourselves, and we'll be moved to do so. It'll make us really nervous. There's all kinds of things. Well, somebody else can do it better than I can. Oh, I can do it a lot better than somebody else can. Or this or that or the other thing. And what happens if that's not happening to me? Am I still growing? Yeah, you're still growing. This is not the only thing that denotes growth. It's just one thing. And one way. But be okay with not pushing it. And be okay with your day-to-day growing. There are people who can actually help in that growing because transmission can occur through them. Remember, they're in mystery school. In a kind of a way, they are. But it's really at a higher level, it's no mystery. It's just recognized and understood to be a state through which energy can flow to be helpful to others who are on the brink of having that happen. So I'd like to close with the idea of everyone being okay. Whoever attempts, no matter what the attempt is, to grow, that attempt is registered and recognized by some school, some flow of frequency that could be helpful to an individual. Usually, it's difficult at first until a particular thing happens. At first, it's about the personality being validated, as I said before, through the right school, others being wrong. All of this sort of stuff. This is our relationship with basic survival. We all know if you have bigger guns, bigger weapons, bigger this, bigger that, you must be better than something else. It doesn't work in this. It's upside down in the higher levels. Those higher level beings who are able to recognize each other, and there's no battle in between them. There's unity, consistency. If they're living on this plane, they run the risk of falling into holes just as much as anybody else. Holes of the making of existence here. But we will assess them based on our view of the world, which is from the bottom up. We do not understand. But as we grow, we begin to understand. This is a movement towards a compassionate understanding. You know, as you engage with you, more about you, granted, but more about others. Others are like you, just in different places. So, it might be helpful to be less focused on being more right about various schools or ways of engaging, or superior because you can do this versus that. And remember one refined moment that may or may not occur with you. If you are clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, just your perceptions are extended beyond the normal person. You may be asked to give this all up so that your personalized version of your own self-interest can be helped to become translucent. Therefore, be a part of your relationship with higher planes, and that will be a place of relationship that is so much broader than what we can truly understand by any extended sensory system. The mind becomes very broad. The brain is helped. The understanding and meanings are expanded. And even after all of that, keeping in mind this one tiny proviso, we're being prepared even then for a different level of engagement. I wish you all well on your journey. Good night.
There's a webcast next Thursday.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. There is a webcast next Thursday. If you have other questions, I would be delighted to try and deal with them. I hope I dealt with most of them. One I didn't, but maybe next week.
5th of March.
5th of March. Take care. Good night.